Good morning and welcome to the 11 o'clock UC Tech session entitled Securing the Cloud, a UC Berkeley Adventure. We will be having this presented by John Ives, who's the Senior Security Analyst here at the Information Security Office at Berkeley. And he'll be joined by Robert Amos, who's the Cloud Operations Manager at Berkeley IT. So this is scheduled to go for 45 minutes. The presenter will show you his preferred way for getting his questions to him. But if you have any problems with that method, you can always use the mic for in-room or the QA session online with Zoom. So take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. The QR code up here is actually for a poll EV. It allows you to put in questions. You can vote up other people's questions. You can, vote them down if they're really bad. Don't do that unless they really are bad. But this is a way for you to actually do it. And that way, at the end, I'll actually be able to make sure I get the top questions answered. Even if we run out of time, we'll be able to prioritize. So, as you said, my name is John Ives. Also, if you don't want to do the QR code, pollev.com/UCTech2023. I always get in there early so I can actually steal the one for the name of the conference. So this is actually, you want to talk about, were you talking about the background? Okay. So we are, this is UC Berkeley, most of the UCs here. We have our cloud usage kind of grew very organically in terms of, basically 10, 12, 15, I don't know, time runs together. Years ago, we started to have people talk about, wanting to use the cloud. And as a security operations team, we did not really have the time or the resources or really the knowledge set to do it. So our answer for people who said, well, I'd like to use the cloud was, sure, just don't put anything sensitive there. That was the grand total of our advice on it. And what that ends up meaning is that, all of, in your shared governance model, your shared security, it all came down to them. The users had to basically, they were completely their own security office in that regard. Anything they needed to do, it was on them. Also, one of the problems that we had was that, it was a lot of it was driven by credits. So, GCP, AWS, they would throw credits at researchers. And so this grew up a lot without any kind of central, it's kind of a central view of it until eventually we did actually end up with a cloud team. But it was no centralized support, and even, well, you can talk about what the level of support is here. And so it really was the way it grew up. It was, this very organic structure. So, Robert.
So before we get into the slide here, I just want to give a quick 2-minute background of how we handle the cloud in Berkeley IT. So I am the cloud operations manager, and me and my team manage what we call the front door to the cloud. We bring customers in all across campus and give them what we call the 4 pillars of our cloud. We call it the B Cloud Central. You'll hear the word central quite a bit. But the 4 things we provide is centralized billing, so that everybody doesn't have to deal with a PO. We can just have one PO to pay for each one of our clouds. We also manage the UC discounts, or we don't create the discounts, but we manage our portion of the UC discounts. Everybody's probably familiar with the discounts that the UCs get in AWS, GCP, and Azure. The 3rd pillar is support. We have enterprise support in AWS, and we have it in Azure as well, and we're currently working on it as Google, but right now we don't have enterprise support. And the last thing is security, and why we're all here. We have some basic guardrails and policies that prevent people from doing what we don't want them to do, but most of the time we just let people kind of have free reign to do what they need. We also have MFA via CalNet authentication service to the console, so it's single sign-on to all 3 clouds, which is a nice little feature if you're through the B Cloud and not doing it on your own. And the last piece is cloud security and posture management, and that's what John's going to talk about here today. So real quick, AWS, it's basically big on administrative. We also have a data lake in there and a lot of data. There was a presentation yesterday by the data analytics group about our data lake. So that's under our B Cloud Central. And then in GCP, it's very heavy research. We get a lot of research out there. The Jupyter Hub, there was a couple sessions on that yesterday and today. We host one of the Jupyter Hubs inside of our GCP, the Data 8. And then there's some big data out there that people dump a lot of other things to. GCP and AWS kind of fight over data. And then Azure, we're currently in a pilot program where we don't have a lot of customers, and we're trying to build that one and grow that one from scratch as well. Our biggest customer is Entra ID, or formerly known as Azure AD. And so that's what we do in Azure, but that one's just starting up. But all three are supported in the Berkeley environment as a self-service.
So when security, after going all that time without really touching it, and we started getting more questions about people wanting to put security into it, and they wanted to put, well, it wasn't so much they want to put security into it, they want sensitive data, and security kind of came with it. We have to do that. So we started looking at it, and we decided, we kind of had three big issues. We had a lot of small issues, but we had three big ones. The first one was visibility. And that is really, what do we have here? Because we really didn't know. The second one is compliance. We had no idea if admins were following policies, because, like all of you, probably the policy follows the data. It's not, it's not associated with the machine or necessarily on campus. The policy has to go wherever the data is, and the compliance falls to that. And the last one was staffing. It's like, do we have the time and the staff time to do this? And at the end, our answer was kind of like, I don't know. So we started off with, the idea of, can we do it ourselves? So, we had, we kind of had like three analysts that we kind of assigned to this, and each got one cloud. It's like, oh, you're doing Azure, you're doing AWS, you're going GCP. And we also took, like a SANS class, and the Sec 510 was a pretty good class. But, each one is, when you have that situation where each one is learning kind of their own niche of it, you're creating a problem where if somebody leaves, you don't have coverage. And that really wasn't a good one to do, but we also didn't have staff time to make all three of these people learn all three clouds. So, can you do it yourself? The answer was really, we didn't think we could, not to the level, not to the degree and the thoroughness that we wanted, at least. So once you have those three things, you go out and say, well, can we pick a product? Is there something out there that we can pay for? Can we throw money at the problem? And it's a lot of money, but let me tell you. So, what we needed in our thing was, it needed to address our security issues, obviously. It needed to integrate into our environment. We actually have our own custom SOC program that we use for managing tickets and for, looking up security contacts. Every IP on campus has a security contact associated with it. Every application does. We needed to integrate that into this. It's a custom program, so we needed something that would integrate. We also wanted a tiered service because, you don't want to throw as much money at something that is like, oh, this is all public data. If somebody sees it, it's like, well, they went through the front door because that's what it's supposed to be there. It's supposed to be showing them this. We don't want to throw as much data information or as much money at that. So a tiered service would allow us to kind of say, oh, well, you have P4 data, you get a lot of attention. You have P1 data. Well, we want to make sure you're not screwing up too bad, but we'll let it go. So, we also, obviously, since we have three clouds and, have on strong authority that there'll probably be another one eventually. We wanted to be cloud agnostic. And finally, our priority was posture management, because workload protection would require, when you look at your cloud environments, one of your big ones is, cloud security posture management, which is did you configure it? Do you have S3 buckets with read to the world, or worse, do you have them with write to the world and sensitive data? There's that level of, looking for it. And then workload protection is more like your IDS, your on host agent driven one. And that tends to be more expensive to run. So what we really were trying for was, here's a minimum level that we would expect everything to do. We still have the workload protection, but our priority really was the posture management, just because it's something we could apply to everyone. It's policies. It's easier to do with the time we had to give it. And, oh, that's why it's missing. So we went to two different cloud platforms that we had existing relationships with them. FireEye, the cloud advisory, which I believe is under Trellix now. I'm not sure. We went with them, and we went with Palo Alto Prisma Cloud. The reason we chose these two is because we have a lot of relationship with these companies already. You know, we kind of knew who we were going to talk to. We knew the vendors, we knew the our support staff. We kind of knew what we were going to get into, and we had a limited time. We had to make this one. So we did a proof of concept of both of these, and we ended up choosing Prisma Cloud. Sort of the reason, the question is, why did we choose Prisma Cloud? Well, first of all, it was a lot easier to set up. We spent a couple months dealing with FireEye, trying to get it set up in our environment. And, it was going back and forth with, okay, this isn't working, this isn't. The Prisma Cloud, we basically turned it on the first day and it was done. Getting a cloud in was that simple for us. It also, we found it had we liked the API better. I think part of that was because the documents were very upfront and open and available to the world. There was no signing into it. It was available for everyone. It was easier to support. This was more of a judgment call, but we thought the interface was better. Like I said, easier integration, but it wasn't just an onboarding, a cloud environment. I'll come back to, they do, as part of our setup process, we have a couple of integrations that we could do and they helped us with, but we did one that it took us, it took us about 10 minutes during a meeting from the time I said I wanted to integrate it till it was integrated. And that part of that time was actually spent discussing whether we for us. It was really very smooth. So implementation, we already kind of doing a 3-phase implementation. The first one was about 3 months. That included onboarding the clouds, the SSO integration. So everybody has to sign on through a single sign-on, and it's integrated into the campus one. Some pilot groups. Well, pilot groups make it sound really small. It was actually 1/3 of our accounts, but that was only 4 groups. We have some people who have a lot of accounts. We also started looking at the standards they offer, the standard versus the IS3 sort of standards, and can we adapt them and everything. And the third-party integration. The first one we did was Slack, kind of, hey, you have a problem here. The other one I told you took only a few minutes was Nessus. It literally was during a meeting, I brought it up. I was like, hey, I'd like to do this. Go around, and everybody was like, okay, sounds good, no problem. And by the time we finished the next topic in the meeting, our admin had actually already done the integration. It was that quick for us. Phase 2, which is what we're in now, or we're coming toward the end of it, was, as I mentioned earlier, we have security contacts, and they're very important to us in terms of being able to say, who has the problem? Who do we talk to? Part of the reason why security contacts are important to us is also how we roll up on metrics. So keeping track of that was important. The thing is, and we'll come back to it, is that, accounts in the cloud are a little different than, an IP address on campus. So, we had to kind of start identifying who the security contacts were for these accounts. Ticketing integration, we have our own ticketing system, so we had to do that one. IR tabletop, I've got somebody working on that. We just haven't quite got that far along with it, but I've worked with the tool enough. I'm not worried about that one too much. Groups and roles, I wrote out, I'm not a programmer at all, and I managed to write out a program that does a really good job of this. Of course, a lot of chat GPT to help me figure out the Python glue between the different modules and everything. But hey, we expanded our test groups. So now actually at this point, we are actually taking in everything on campus except for one group who opted out. And because I told them that, you know, up until the time that we actually go to live production, you can opt out. I'm not going to hold it against you. If we want to opt out after live production, you had to get a security exception. But, you know, we had only one group that took us up on that. And the way I think of this is that we're kind of in a full monitoring situation, but limited ticketing. If something really bad came along, we'd create a ticket, but since it'd kind of be outside of our, you know, as we're still working out the bugs on the ticketing integration, it'd be outside of our normal automatic process, but we are doing it. We figured this whole thing was going to be about 6 months, and we're a little ahead of schedule on most of it. There's a couple things like the IR tabletop that just we've had higher priorities elsewhere. But everything else we're kind of ahead of it. The next one, phase 3, and that one's what we're going to kind of come up here, and we're scheduling this for the fall, even though we will have some time between now and then. I figure August is kind of a lost month with, you know, getting ready for classes and, you know, natural downtimes and everything that we have to have, and everybody being really busy. So during this phase, you know, we'll create users, though I probably won't do that till after the training. We'll do some cloud account integration. So kind of you create roles. One thing I don't like too much is that you create roles, and these you have to create an account group, and you create a role to go with that account group. Then you create the account group to this user, and it's kind of this, the process for assigning permissions is slower than I would have liked, which is why I tried to automate it with a script. But some of that stuff is what we're going to be doing in the account integration phase. Training and resources, I'm actually taking advantage of Palo Alto, because they have these things that they do for, like, you know, hey, we want to sell you a product. They call it an ultimate test drive. Well, their ultimate test drive is kind of a overview of the system and how you use it. You know, you log into an interface and everything, and you do all this stuff. And so I talked to our account reps, and they were willing to basically use that class. They're going to do it 3 times for us. And that's going to be one of our major training sources. You know, we said, here are the modules that we are using, and here's the ones we're not. So what is supposed to be a 4-hour session will probably come down to 2 hours. And I'm using our relationship with Palo Alto to make them do the training for us. Also some knowledge base articles, which some of them have been written, some of them are still working on. And that's when, during phase 3 is also when we're going to go to automated ticketing. Since we're spacing out the training so everybody can get to it, we're doing 1 a month. So by Thanksgiving, this phase should be completely done. You know, most of it's going to be done, you know, called by the end of September. But because of training, we're going to go a little longer than that. And so what I believe most people are here for, because it's the reason I go to a conference or talk about, you know, a product or something, some people doing lessons learned. So we've learned lessons at pretty much every step of the way. In the first one, which is during the proof of concept, that's where we discovered that, you know, every cloud, what they consider account is represented, you know, Prisma says they're all an account. But an account in AWS is, you know, the billing account. In Azure, it's the billing account plus these other things, they're called security groups, are also considered accounts. In GCP, it's every project, which is not a billing account. So it's not the way that we would actually know who is responsible for the account. So each one has this little different, you know, these nuances, and we discovered that, and it's been an ongoing issue since then. Organization is really key, and you know, our AWS was, you know, is very kind of set up from the beginning in a very organized fashion. Well, we're a GCP shop for education, or a Google for education shop, which means every student here could spin up some projects on their own. That basically, they all fall under the, you know, when they were set up, because it was kind of set up almost by accident, you know, berkeley.edu, that's the root of it. They all fell into a flat tree. So it was all flat. So you have 80,000 projects in one environment. When we tried to, you know, do our sizing, which is part of the POC, they all came in one thing. And so, you know, some of them had been organized a little after that, but a lot of them still exist in that bottom level, or actually, I guess the top level. And what you ended up with was the, you know, did we get all the accounts we actually wanted to monitor in our sizing? And the answer is unfortunately no. So not having that organization in advance made it very difficult for us to actually get the proper sizing. We also found out this is a moving target in that new features, APIs, those are all, it's kind of the cloud model, move fast and break stuff. Things are constantly evolving. And so we only noticed this slightly during the POC, but you come in one day and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, we got some warning messages because you don't have permissions to read stuff because they had changed the what they were actually monitoring, the APIs they were trying to call. And every time they do, you have to change, you have to update permissions in there. And the other one that we found was where Robert's going to come in, and it's the hidden costs, the cost of actually feeding the system.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So one of the big things with clouds is cost. So there's the Prisma cost, which John deals with on his side, and there's all the cloud costs, the AWS costs, the GCP costs. And when we enabled Prisma, if you throw this up on here, this is just a daily chart, nice little one. We found that five main things, CloudTrail, CloudWatch, GuardDuty, SQS, Security Hub, and a few others increased significantly for a few of these pilot accounts, or I'd say a majority of these pilot accounts. And this was unexpected. This was not told from the Prisma side, and AWS really didn't know anything about it because we just kind of enabled it. This didn't seem to happen in GCP or Azure. Azure is obviously a very small deployment, so we didn't see it there, but GCP didn't have these costs, but Azure did. So trying to figure out where these costs came from as we worked together greatly as a team, the security team and the cloud team, to kind of figure out where these costs came from. How do we fix these costs so the users don't see the cost on their Amazon bill? And this was probably when it first was enabled back in February, as you can see. But today, I think when we did it, I think it was an average of like almost $100 more a month to enable Prisma. But after working with the security team, I think we have it down to around $11 to $13, which is a very reasonable cost to have. It just creates more traffic in all of we already currently had monitoring in AWS, and Prisma Cloud just creates more traffic, which Amazon charges us for more traffic. So that was a big part of these hidden costs, was a huge deal. But we worked as a team with the security team, and it, got to work through it really well. So it's my nice friendly little graph here.
Well, one of the things that caused the most of it in AWS were the people who had more than one CloudTrail. It's kind of a crack or a drug dealer sort of thing, and that AWS gives you the first one for free. All the API calls you make are free. Everything after that they charge you a lot for. And so the 5-6 accounts that had that already had a CloudTrail in addition, they were barely touching it, so they didn't really notice the cost. Well, once you're actually querying it all the time, their costs were going up by about 1,000% for a CloudTrail. And for some of that was rather significant. The other things like, GuardDuty, those were a little more manageable and everything. One of the big things we did for actually reducing the cost was Prisma will query every region that, each of your cloud providers has. Well, we had our people only in 4 regions. So it was trying to make API calls to regions that weren't being used. But because there was an API call being made, AWS would charge you for it. One of the things I wasn't so happy with, and they supposedly are going to change, and they're looking at changing in the future, is that in order to get it down to just the regions we use, you actually had to open a support ticket with them. There's no way that you could configure, well, we want these regions or we don't want these. You actually had to open a support ticket with them. If you change or anything, you had to open another support ticket to have it changed. So they do that all in the back end. It's easy to do, but not having that in our control was kind of annoying.
Yeah, just one more thought on it too, is one of the things we did to try to mitigate this, just as a lesson learned, is in AWS specifically, we turned on cost anomaly detection, which is a feature where we could put, hey, watch CloudTrail. If it all of a sudden spikes to 1,000%, or we put it much lower than that, we would get alerts. And we also turned on in our Cost Explorer, which is Amazon's kind of cost view tool, to instead of do daily billing, we even took it down to hourly billing. So we can actually see when these calls were going out. Were they going out at the middle of the night? Were they correlating with when Prisma was doing it? Or was this something else? I mean, obviously we turned it on and we saw the next day it was high, but we got really granular on where this cost was coming from and try to detect it. And that's what John said. We found out it was mostly CloudTrail because of the investigation that my team did and the security team did.
So those were the lessons we learned just during the proof of concept. Well, later on we bought it and we're deploying it, and there are more things that we're discovering. So I mentioned earlier about kind of that, the constantly changing permissions and the APIs. Well, that can change between 1 and 3 times a month. And they'll announce it in advance. You can say, oh, here are the new permissions we're going to need next month. And that's that is a manual process where you have to go in and add them. Or you can wait till after they've done it, in which case you can go and log in and download like CloudFormation template and deploy it with your new permissions. But that is always after the fact. So and because they can change between 1 and 3 times a month, and you know what's going to happen that month. You don't know what day they're happening. So all of a sudden you come in the morning and there's an error because you're not ingesting the new APIs. And sometimes they're APIs that you're not even using. You don't have anybody who's using that service, but it's making calls to it, and now you're getting errors pop up. So the care and feeding of actually constantly changing these permissions is a pain in the ass, to be quite frank. It's not, I don't think it takes a lot of your team's time, but it is something that has to be kept on top of. I've been talking to them, and one thing I will say for them is they are pretty good about taking feedback. And so one of the things I've been talking to them, and every time I get a chance, I remind them that I want this feature is that to actually give the template, at the beginning of the month. So if you gave it for the whole month, we'd only have to do that one time. And yes, we'd be giving it permissions that it may not need till the 25th of the month, but it's still the one account that we've actually enabled. So it's not that big of a deal. Like I said, new features. One day I came in and the whole interface, the front page was completely different. And I was kind of like, what am I looking at here? Turns out most of the back end was still the same, but you will see suddenly, hey, a new interface is there, and you don't get a whole lot of warning about that. And so that's kind of, it's the cloud model. Shadow systems, as I mentioned earlier, that they have a difference between, what each system sees as an account, what each cloud does. And, Prisma says all accounts, but each cloud is a little different. Well, Prisma is not ingesting like this information for billing for GCP. So we actually had to build, in order to get back to who is paying for the account, so we actually know what department and everything like that. And so who's the security contact, we had to build our own shadow system to basically collect that information. Not thrilled with that. Another thing I've asked Prisma to kind of work with. And when I say, I talk about how they are pretty receptive to this stuff. They have a whole website that, you can go in, you can say, hey, I would like to see it doing this. And, other people can vote on it, and it's a public forum, and everybody can say, yes, I'd like that, or no, you can give comments, or they can say, hey, I like that, but can you do this also as part of this? And so they're pretty good about taking feedback. And at one time, I think they had like, oh, it's been 3 months since our last check-in. And they do a little survey. And I said, well, it's working really great, except for, I'm missing a couple APIs that I would like, and, a couple other things. And like a week later, I got a phone call from wanting to set up a meeting to actually discuss what I needed. And, is it possible for them to integrate it in? They brought in some of their, higher level managers. So they are very receptive to changes. I haven't seen everything I've asked for yet, but at least they do seem to be taking it seriously. Another issue we found, and this one, is that cloud usage changes a lot. So we did our trial, our POC in February. By the time we deployed it, we'd had one group that I think they had existed in their own GCP, but they got moved into our, the central GCP. And when we had actually tried saying, oh, how many credits are we going to need? They call them credits, which tends to conflict with other things. GCP also refers to them as credits. So when I deal with GCP, I call them licenses, so keep them straight. But we had said, when we did our POC, one of the things you're doing is trying to find out how many of those credits you need. Well, during our POC, we needed about 150. So we're like, well, we want to schedule for some growth over the next couple of years. So we doubled the number, and then we added another 100 on top of it. Well, this one group that came in during that time, they took about, a sixth of our total credits all by themselves. So where we said we needed 150, and we actually paid for 400, they were using, a sixth of those all by themselves, plus some other groups that hadn't even existed before came in. So just the time between our proof of concept and when we licensed it, the landscape changed so much that when we actually got to where we're deploying everything, we're using most, I think I checked again, a few days ago, and we were using about 350 of our 400 credits. Because it just changed so fast during that time. And so if you're doing something like this, I would strongly advise you to, take your wireless streams and double them. If you can afford it, that's what you should go with. And one of the things that comes in there is that some things like your credits, if you have a EC2 instance up there, you get charged for, you get 1 credit and it costs 1 credit. You pay that 1 credit whether the thing is on or off. And so we have one group that is doing a lot of research, and GCP is basically just throwing, 50,000, 100,000, whatever a month they need to do this research at them. Well, because GCP is completely underwriting it, they have no need to get rid of anything ever. So I'm kind of feeling like that father sort of thing where it's like, did you turn off the lights? No, really, did you turn off the lights? If you don't need it, please turn it off because it's costing us money. And since we were actually, they're not seeing the cost of what we're paid for this, they don't have any incentive to do it. And so that's another thing that you really do need to keep in mind on this. And so now time for questions and answers. As I said before, you can put them in through, Poll EV. So that's pollev.com/UC Tech 2023. It doesn't look like we've had any yet. Has there been any? Okay. Anybody have any questions then?
Any in the chat? Wow, great job.
Yes.
You had mentioned that as you were trying to keep track of things across 3 different providers, or what the right term is, that was a challenge, and it was a challenge to get it back to like who in our organization was responsible for certain things. Could you say a little bit more about that shadow? Because then if I followed it correctly, then I think I heard you say you created a shadow system to kind of blend that all together. Is that, could you say a little bit more about that challenge, and how do you kind of tie it back to the context that we need on campus?
Well, the only one we actually needed the shadow system for is GCP. Because we have a system on campus where they have to register, any service they're doing, anything, they register IP addresses or they register accounts or something like that. And so we have our security contacts as a result of that. So GCP, well, AWS and Azure, we're basically the billing account was who we pivot off of between who's the security contact and who's the actually running the cloud one. GCP, what we'd see is that, EECS would have, 1 account, though they don't, but they're getting actually slower, and they do like 50 different projects. Well, each project, we don't have that pivot point back to it because they didn't ingest that. So what we basically had to do was get a system that say, okay, here's the project, then make API calls to GCP to figure out who is the pays the account. And from the account, it's, the org node and all that other stuff, we were able to get to who the security contact was. And so we had to build this other system that actually did those queries because GCP does not, Prisma does not ingest the APIs that we would need to do it. I've asked for them to put it in, who knows, maybe someday they will, but in the meantime, we actually had to build this. And so the reason why this is kind of an issue is because when we did, last time I looked, which is, yesterday or the day before, we had like, 6 new projects that we didn't have security contacts for that were in there, and we just didn't know who they were. And because projects can come and go so easily in GCP, asking people to register them, we, even with what we're doing now, we can only monitor them to a certain degree. Because if you are looking at, we have 23, I think, security contacts in EECS but they have one master security. They have one master account, or a couple actually, but they're trying to consolidate all down to one master account. So getting the right security contact to it is either they have to change it, or what we're going to have to do is to say, okay, we're going to send everything to the each security contact and you have to figure out which project it goes to. We would like to be a little more automated and user friendly than that. If people register it and they do that, we can. But we're trying to basically work around this like lack of information that they had in Prisma that we had in the other ones. Okay, so online we have how do you work with account owners to fix things that Prisma finds? Well, actually, that is a pretty good question. What we're doing there is that we're sending them a ticket. Actually, one of the things that Prisma is really good at is that anything they have an alert for, they generally have a how do you handle it. And so it is part of the alert. So we get a JSON blob that says, here's the alert, and here's the issue, and here's the account, and here's the object. And there's a part of it that actually says, here's how to manually check and go into it and go into AWS, look at click on this thing, look for this setting. Is this the appropriate setting or something like that? Also, if it is something that they could automatically resolve, which it has the ability to do, but I think we're a little hesitant to turn that on, it will give you like the actual command line tool for turning off a share all, or turning on one of the monitoring things or something like that. It actually will give them that information, and that goes into the ticket that we send them. If that is not enough, well, we haven't had too many of those yet. And so it's probably going to be a balancing act trying to figure out who is the best people to support them. But since we haven't gone to full ticketing yet, that's going to have to play out a little. So the next question we have is there an integration with ServiceNow as ticketing system or metadata for owner information? If so, could you please explain a little on what was done? There is an integration with it. However, we don't use ServiceNow within our unit, so I haven't explored that one yet. We actually, for our actual ticketing part and the final ticketing sending out, we use request tracker. That's not what we really use for most of our work, like assigning who the security contact is, but that is like the actual email agent that uses it. So I have not looked at ServiceNow, but I do know there's integration. My understanding is it actually works pretty well when I've talked to other people in terms of, resolving everything, allowing people to put in comments or whatever you would do in ServiceNow, but I haven't actually used it. So what consequences are there for account people who don't do the fix this ticket? It's probably going to depend on what the severity of it is. We've had a pretty good history in the past of being able to on campus, we have kind of a sledgehammer approach where if they don't want to work with us at all and they don't even talk to us, they get blocked. We are trying to work out how we're going to handle Prisma Cloud, but I think for the most part, it's going to be a lot of hand holding. And, if you don't do something, we're going to have to tell your boss, or we're going to tell your dean or whatever. It's going to probably be a lot of, tattling. If they don't want to work with us at all, that's probably what it's going to come down to. And there'll be conversations for people well above my pay grade. Thank you. So, is there any integration with, okay, I already got the ServiceNow one. Oh man, these are starting to roll in fast. How do you actually provide security to these users? Do you give them templates, guardrails, guidance, etc.? Or in other words, how does shared responsibility work for the security control? I'm actually moving all of the IS3 requirements into it. So we will actually have, there will be a profile, or a compliance one. There are like 80, 90, 100 profile of compliances checks already. So, if you have, it'll have stuff for doing PCI, it'll have stuff for doing HIPAA, all these sort of compliance warnings you could run against it. Well, I'm taking elements of those and moving them because I don't have to rewrite the whole rule for it. I just had to say, oh, this also applies to this other policy over here. And so there's like 1,700 policies in there. So it's going to take me a little time to get through all of them. I've kind of worked at the critical ones and I'm working my way down in priority. But that's what we're going to do is, it's going to come down to, we're going to use the IS3 compliance and we're going to kind of try to hold them to that. Actually, how do you monitoring features and Prisma policy requirements like IS3? Well, that's how I do it. I just kind of create an IS3 policy in there. You mentioned that user account creation in Prisma was time consuming. Do they have plans to integrate with Active Directory or user management in the future? It does integrate with Active Directory already, but because of the way we do groups and policy, how we do groups on campus, it isn't going to be the best way. The SAML that we use is kind of a non-standard, at least as far as they're concerned, SAML. And so that we've had some issues with that. We go back and forth on talking to them on how we're going to do that. But honestly, I'm just going to script it for the most part to make, I've already scripted out how to create all the account groups and all the roles. So now it's just an issue of creating the accounts, and the account really comes down to put in a name. I put in a first name and last name and email address, and then I assign it to a role. Well, with that sort of thing, you can repeat that pretty easily. I'll probably just do a CVS file, CSV, and just throw that at it. So that one's done. How good are the web app vulnerability scanning tools in Prisma? It's really not a, at that point, it doesn't really do it. I mean, they're in the workload protection. There are some tools for that, but the workload protection is not our priority. So I haven't really tested that too much. They could use all the things that are built into AWS or GCP and do it there, and we would still get those results because it goes into guard duty or it goes into security center, and we get those results out of there. But I haven't really spent much time on that one. Which groups are you able to utilize existing groups in your central authentication authorization system? That was something we've had a problem with. I tried doing that at one point, and it was early on. They might have actually supported that now, but at that time, because of everything always comes from LDAP, and while they support LDAP, like a lot of places, they're like, oh, we support Microsoft LDAP. Well, if you're not using Microsoft LDAP, you don't really. It doesn't quite work the same, or it doesn't quite work out. So it's one that, we started to do, and then I kind of like, it's easier for me just to create these another way. So I haven't come back to it. It's something that, I will periodically I talk to them about and say, hey, how's it changed? Is there any changes here or there? So that's what I'll do there. Got 2 minutes left, so let me try to get some last couple ones. You mentioned that in the pilot stage for implementing Prisma Cloud with Azure, you have timeline for full implementation. It actually will go full implementation as soon as it does for everybody else. The thing is that Azure is in a pilot. So it will be there when they start doing it. It's already actually monitoring those. Which groups were you able to utilize? Okay, okay, go for it.
So yeah, real quick on the Azure, we're currently in the pilot group. I think we have to the end of the calendar year is when we want to be out of the pilot group right now. We've just accepted like 3 or 4 recently. So yeah, that's what we're shooting for, is the end of the calendar year 23.
Okay, so try to do the last one really quick since people voted up. Were there any challenges in getting alignment with account owners to implement this program, and how were they overcome? Honestly, we tell them we're going to do it, and most of them are like, okay. We really didn't get much pushback on it.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on that. It's a lot of our customers saw it as a benefit, because if they go out on their own, there's no security in there. And I have this kind of philosophy in our cloud group. We have the carrot and we have more carrots. And so this is just adding more carrots to our service and bringing people over and providing protection with all the other additions we have in the central service.
Yeah, and the 10, $12, $13 that they're being charged is not too bad. Do you happen to know if Prisma works with Oracle Cloud, OCI? Yes, it does. I will warn you that its support is kind of a little weaker. When I look at it, there are things I'm always looking, I'm like, yeah, they already have that feature in AWS or GCP. because I look at the, you know, what people are requesting, but yes, it does support it. It's just a little behind the curve. Yeah, I think we're at time. Okay.
So I just want to say one thing. I have a question for you. So Oracle Cloud's our fourth cloud? Is that what you're telling me? That's news to the cloud team.
Well, I had that question. I did not ask that question. Somebody asked that question, but yeah, I've heard where Oracle Cloud was going to be coming in. And thank you all.